I'm back and I've been testing more Heralds of Darkness. I'm having an absolute blast with this list, and I've got some changes that I'm going to make, which I'll get into towards the end. But I was also playing into someone who was testing their own list, so I got a chance to play into James Ramsey. You might recognise the name, he's been on the channel a few times. He was here for the first State of Play, the Vampire Counts, after he won, I think it was 2 or 3 events with Vampire Counts earlier on in the edition. He's trying some new stuff, seeing what works best, having a bit of a play around. There's a big brick of Blood Knights, but we'll get into his list in just a second. So my list is pretty similar, but I made a couple of tweaks. Don't love the tweaks I made, but here we have it. Going through the list on New Recruit because it didn't import into Warhol for some reason properly, but that's fine. So the list is, we've got 3 aspiring champions on the Chosen Chariots. This is the meat of the list. Obviously, going for the counter charge on those Chosen Chariots, I think it's incredibly strong. If you're playing into any sort of cavalry, it's very good. If you're playing into dragons, it's significantly less good, but it's still pretty decent. So we've got 2 here which are equipped with, well, all 3 have a flail because you're going to be countercharging, so getting the initiative. A flail is basically a great weapon that strikes at initiative on the first turn, minus the armor bane. In extended combats, it's not as good, but a chariot isn't very good in extended combats as well. So I think a flail is a perfect weapon for these if you're not going for some sort of magic weapon. They're all armed with a flail and a single favor of the gods. Nice and easy there. One of them has the Mark of Khorne as well. Because of the way that the upgrades work, the Mark of Khorne is only on the character, so you'd have to pay an extra 10 points to put it on the chariot as well, which is honestly 20 points for 3 attacks is probably too steep for me. Not something that I'm interested in paying. This was literally just to unlock the core choice, because in Heralds of Darkness, for every mark you have other than Mark of Undivided, you have to match it between characters and units. So if I wanted to go for, a cheap unit of Fire and Forget Marauder Horsemen, and I give them Mark of Khorne and Flails, to do that, I have to have a character. So that was what I was testing with this version of the list. I've got the very standard level 4 Sorcerer Lord. I found some points to make him Nurgle in this army. Nurgle gives you the +1 toughness spell. It remains in place, so it might get dispelled, but if you get it off and you're going for darkness as well, demonology, you can also stack up the +1 toughness from Demonic Vessel or Demonic Vigor, whichever one it is, and that gets you to T6 only on the turn you charge. Realistically, your opponent's probably going to dispel your remains in play toughness. They need to roll an 8 or get an 8, especially if they've got a level 4 who's not in combat. But you can charge in, you can hit something, you can not take too much damage on the swing back. I think that's quite a good combo. Also, rerolling 6 to hit that big unit, the Death Star that the character goes in, is just generically good. So we've got the Sorcerer Lord, Mark and Nurgle, level 4, Demonology, Spell Familiar, and Infernal Puppet. This gets you up to 5 spells. There is 1 spell specifically you're going for, Demonic Vessel, to give you +1 strength, attacks, and AP for you, your mount, and everyone in the unit you're in. I don't get it in this game, so this was a good sort of limit test to see how the list plays without it, but that's one of the changes that we make to get some more reliability. Obviously, Infernal Puppet, very good. It does shut down my opponent's casting early on, but we'll get into that and whether I think it's worth taking in this sort of list. Into the core, we've got 2 units of Chaos Knights. We've got 1 unit of Chaos Knights. They're 14 strong, lances, heavy armor shield, Mark and Nurgle, Brazen Collar for magic resist 2 on the unit champion, only 20 points, absolute steal. Lots of units are picking up like the Spell Eater Axe now for 35 points, which makes your attacks worse and costs almost twice as much. If you're playing Chaos, just take this as often as you realistically can. Then you've got to fill up the points with a couple of units of Warhounds and some Marauder Horsemen. These are fine. Honestly, I don't think I'm going to go for the Khorne unit again. I wasn't super impressed with them here, but it's something to play around with if you're willing to go a little bit more risky with your chariots, which turns out I'm not. Then into special, there's a unit of 4 Dragon Ogres. Sidebar, I want to play around with a list that runs 3 units of 4. I feel like that's probably quite strong. So maybe that's something to mess around with. Maybe Beastmen, because they've got less good ways to spend their points. Something to build around in the future. And then a unit 2 Chaos Spawn. Why did I go Chaos Spawn? I had a weird amount of points left. I wanted to give them a try as well. I went for Spawn of Khorne because they're not marked. They get around the mark restriction, which is pretty nice. Obviously, the same with the Greater Spawn, which is usually a stronger way to do things. But 106 points for Killing Blow Spawn. Honestly, I was pretty impressed with them, and we'll get into those later on in the game as well. I haven't got Ramsey's exact list, but I've put the bones of it together. There are a couple of upgrades missing. There's about 70 odd points there that I'm not sure what he went for. I'm not sure what the banner on the White Lord was, for example, but the main meat and potatoes are here, and I'm sure he can fill in the gaps down below later on as well. So the basic is we've got the level 4 general, the necromancer, mortis engine, the usual stuff. In this case, going necromancy, spell familiar, so you get those 5 spells, talisman of protection to give you a 5-up ward alongside your 4-up armor save from the mortis engine, and the 5-up regen as well. Makes you pretty tanky. You can stay behind the rest of your units. Scepter of Dinero. This lets you res a second time. So you take, 2 tests instead of 1. You can res more stuff. This is really important if you're running the big Blood Knight brick, which Ramsey was. It means that you can heal them back to ludicrous levels very quickly. The downside is after you've resed for a second time in a turn, roll a d6. On a 1, you take a wound. Sure, fine. You've got a deep pool of wounds. It's not the end of the world. There's a level 2 caster as well. Again, more buffing, all of the good stuff there. I can't remember exactly what it was equipped with, but basically a level 4 that's buffed to the 9s, a level 2 that is not. There was a vampire count, which is buffed to the 9s. So between level 2, just paid for as an upgrade, and the Master of the Black Arts upgrade, that is a level 3 caster. Also, Pick Delusion went for Great Weapon to go with Spectral Doppelganger, Law Familiar, so you can pick Spectral Doppelganger, and then Crown of the Damned for a 4-up ward. Yes, this does give you Stupidity. Is it the end of the world? Not massively. In the same unit as a White Lord with a BSB, this unlocks your Graveguard and Core, so it's just nice to have. And because you're undead, it means you get to reroll all of your leadership tests. Stupidity is a leadership test, which means that you're going to be, re-rolling that leadership if you need to. So realistically, you're almost never going to have an issue with your unit not doing what they want to. Why has Ramsey gone for the 4-up board with the Stupidity? You can't put any armor on this character because he's a caster and it's on foot. It's kind of squishy, so it makes sense to me to go for that 4-up board. Into core, we've got the Graveguard, unit of 26, great weapons, full command, Drakenhof banner, all just good stuff there. We're both musician pilled, huge fans of musicians in all of your units where you're going to end up in combat, or even if you're just going to run away with that unit and you want to rally them. It's just fantastic. You're more likely to win combats. You cause fear. You're probably going to double outnumber. There's just a lot of good stuff here that's you really want to make effect of. 21 zombies. You go with a unit about 20 to 26, something along those lines. Then you can buff them turn 1 with your raised dead, or your rezzing. Even if you go first, that way you're getting some value out of your roll. And into rare, 11 Blood Knights with no drilled. They have got the full plate, so getting into that 2-up save, and then they've got a 6-up regen as well, which is pretty nice. Castellan and Standard Bearer, you can't fit a musician in here, which I think is a real shame, and does matter later on, which is quite fun. I feel like, again, you should be taking musicians on all of your undead units if you can, but no points for it, so I had to pay the price on that one. So in this game, we're both playing basically full melee, which I think is quite interesting. There's no, nobody's playing any real range. There's a couple of magic missiles in there. I decided not to go for the magic missile. Again, rolled my spells, didn't get Demonic Vessel, so not able to buff those Chaos Knights up the way that I wanted to, which is honestly quite important in the undead matchup where you've got to kill huge amounts of models. If all of my stuff had +1 attack and, extra AP, that'd be really nice for grinding through, but I didn't get it, so you just got to take what you can get. And it's good limit testing to play in the worst case scenario, find out how that goes for you. So as you can see here, I've got the Dragon Ogres in sort of my center right. Then my opponent James has got some zombies down near the building on his top left. I put down, after that, some Marauder Horsemen, a couple of Chaos Warhounds down as well, and James put down the rest of his drops. A huge line of zombies screening out the first charge. That's something that he wanted to avoid, and also trying to limit the impact hits. Graveguard deployed behind the zombies as well. Master Necromancer is sat very safely behind the screening units, and we've got a Necromancer in the unit of zombies, just the level 2, and then the White Lord and the Vampire are in the middle of the Graveguard. Both of these units have gone very wide. James is a huge believer in going for the Great Weapon approach with your Graveguard. You just go super wide. Your opponent charges in. You lose loads of models, sure, but and there's massive static combat rares even with the regens, because the banner of the Drakenhof banner getting you that 5-up regen. You're still going to lose, get those combat rares against you, but you don't lose the models. You then make back 15 to 20 great weapon attacks. You may lose combat, you get pushed back, you res loads of models, you grind through the combat, and eventually you win. It's a pretty good strategy, honestly. The more I see it, the more I respect it. I think Graveguard are a pretty fantastic unit. And then you can see the Blood Knights here deployed just to the front to get some aggressive play going. That is the issue with going super wide with the units. It's very difficult to put down stuff. There is a wood here on the top left of the map. That would have been difficult for James to maneuver around. Obviously, it really slows you down. If you go around it, I've got scope to just sort of move, block you, redirect you, all that stuff. So he did end up putting them just in front of the zombies and had to go not quite as wide as he wanted in the first place. As for myself, my Chaos Knights sat on the hill. They've got the Vanguard banner. I didn't mention that before, but, just getting that violence turn 1 or turn 2 at the latest is quite nice. Some Warhounds on each flank. They're going to Vanguard forwards as well. And I've just got the chariots as centrally as possible because I want to be able to respond to how my opponent plays. Realistically, what I want to do is threaten the Blood Knights with them, because countercharge only works into cavalry monsters, and I think that's it. Just various different cavalry and monsters. But what that means is I'm not going to countercharge into Graveguard or zombies. Sure, theoretically, they should never be charging me, but I want to make the most of my rule and see what I can get done there. So I've got the Mark of Khorne, Aspiring Champion, the one at the right of the hill, the one that's a little bit far forwards there. Then I've got the General, who is just behind him, just chilling there. And then I've got another character here as well, just a generic one, no upgrades. Marauder Horsemen are on the left. They're just sort of planning to be a fire and forget, chuck them into something, do loads of attacks. And then the Khorne Chaos Spawn are on my bottom right. And I think my deployment is pretty good. This is significantly better than my last game. As I've said, and people have pointed out, is very weird for someone who's playing fantasy. I'm relearning how to play close order units, where you actually have to respect moving in straight lines and facings being super important. Obviously, I understand the mechanics of it, but it's sort of planning out your turns and making sure you get good matchups and good fights. That's what I'm getting practice with. So we roll off. James got the first turn because he rolled a 6 and he had the +1, so there was never any hope of beating him. And we go into James's turn. As you can see from the deployment, we'd already moved a little bit, but the Blood Knights move forwards. The Skeletons and the Graveguard move forwards a little bit as well, just to make sure that they were just outside of my charge range with the Chaos Knights, who have vanguarded forwards. So they, saying, I don't want to deal with you for as long as possible. And that's about it. It's a pretty short turn 1. Tries to cast some spells, does some rezzing. Not all that much happens. Into my turn 1, and I think my turn 1 positioning is actually pretty solid. So the 2 units of Warhounds, I don't really have much of a game plan for, which is a shame. I probably should have used them better. I think that's the turn 1 big failing, and like deployment and turn 1 move failing, that the Chaos Warhounds don't do much. I just send them out to the flanks, make it so that I try to make Ramsay have to deal with them on the flanks. They're only war dogs, but sure, if I'm charging a very thin unit, I can get some combat res that way, which is not the end of the world. Everything else kind of just moves forwards. The Dragon Ogres shuffle forwards, so they are technically within charge range, but because the Blood Knights would have to go through the wood, they're unlikely to make it. I think they were something like 15 inches away, something along those lines. So I was pretty comfortable saying that James wasn't going to go for the risky charge. Knowing the sort of player he is, he takes calculated risks. He's not going to go for the wild, but I'm going to charge you through the wood. And if he had gone for that, I could always run away if I wanted to, but it's not an ideal option for me. So then I've got the 2 chariots, and I think I said they were the other way around. But basically, the one at the front is the one with the Mark of Khorne, and the one to the left is the General. So the Mark of Khorne is the one that I want to be countercharging and getting all those attacks. Other than that, the leftmost Aspiring Chariot just marches forwards as far as possible, just to make sure that I can theoretically get a charge. And on the right-hand flank as well, the Khorne spawn just shuffle forwards. They only go about 7 inches, not very far, but I want to start threatening the multi-charge into the Blood Knights. Blood Knights are hard to kill. You need to kind of kill them all in one go. If I can counter-charge in So say Ramsay goes for the charge into the front chariot, I countercharge in, I challenge out. Blood Knights can't refuse a challenge, so that means I'd be relatively safe. I'd win that combat, the Blood Knights would get pushed back a little bit, maybe they'd lose a couple of models, and then I get to charge in with the Dragon Ogres, another chariot, and the Chaos Spawn. And I feel pretty good about winning that combat. That's the sort of the game plan here. Obviously, Ramsay's very good, so he's not going to just let me do that for free. Coming into James's second turn, the puppet does what it's meant to do. It's currently sat within range of both of the casters, and it shuts down the casting from the Necromancer on the Mortis engine, makes it very difficult. He does manage to get one spell off, but I can't remember what it is. Not an important one. It's sort of in the command phase. He does cast the reserve move spell, but he only gets it off on the lower level. That goes into the Graveguard, but doesn't manage to get it off on the level 2, so the zombies in front don't get a move, meaning that realistically the Graveguard are just kind of sat where they want to be. They don't get a move, they don't get to do anything fun. The Mortis engine moves forwards, and the Blood Knights move backwards in a cowardly fashion, which is the correct thing to do, because if Ramsay had gone for the charge, as I just described, I'd then muller him in my turn. But yeah, doesn't want to take that fight, does want to just sort of bait me forwards. As you can see here, a lot of the War Dogs did die. The Warhounds did die. Very sad. That's the Necromancy magic missile that does 3d3, strength 2, hits, no armor saves. Joke's on him, I did armor on those models anyway. 3 die, they flee. It's fine. It's a 35-point skirmishing unit. If he's doing that, he's not putting it in something more important, like, for example, the Chaos Knights that would really not like to have that cast on them. But again, not a super important turn. There's Van Hel's Dance Macabre, that's the name of the spell, cast on the zombies, which is giving them plus weapon skill. This is quite nice because he does manage to get them up to a point where I'm only hitting them on 4s instead of 2s, which is where I would have been before. So does make the zombies more survivable, basically planning to have them not get ruined when I charge in on next turn, because everything's sort of lined up to do that. But yeah, just playing very conservatively. This is a sort of list where you wait for your opponent to come to you. You do some sort of small scoring in the early game if you can with your magic missiles, but mostly you're just sort of sitting there and waiting for your opponent to come to you so you can crush them with the unending wave of bodies that is your undead plan. And in my turn, as I did say, I was going to charge the Marauder Horseman, the Aspiring Champion on the left, and the big unit of Chaos Knights all charge into the zombies. This goes very well. On the right-hand flank, for me, my War Dogs don't rally. They're only leadership 6, I think, and haven't got a hope in hell. The War Dogs on the left move round to flank. I don't charge them into... I don't think they're in range, but I wouldn't want them in range, like next to the zombies. The reason for that is I'm hoping to crush them in combat and then overrun. And if I do that, the sideways on War Dogs are going to cause me some issues in terms of getting the rest of my units to run forwards. So, multi-charge into the zombies, who are a big line in front. Other than that, chariots move forwards. The Corn Spawn roll a double 1 for their movement. They're not very keen to get up into the Blood Knights, which is fine. I don't want them there this turn, but still a little bit slower than I might want. So on the left-hand flank, full send. On the right-hand flank, just positioning. Obviously, counter-charge. I really want to make sure I get that. Something that is a bit of a problem is there is a mark of Khorne on this front chariot. I've mentioned that a couple of times, but it's something I'm taking off because you really want control. You do not want to be failing charges on your turn, because if you do to fail a charge, you're probably going to be within range so that you don't get to countercharge. But, we'll get to that down the line. I have been remembering to use my, Favor of the Gods table, the Dark Gaze or whatever it's called. And at this point, the Khorne chariot has had +2 attacks, which is pretty wild. The generals had +1 leadership and strength and an attack. Obviously rolling a 6 and a 4 there, and then the Aspiring Champion on the left-hand flank has only had +1 toughness and another fairly inconsequential buff. But it's going really well. Actually rolling on the table means your army is a lot more effective, so that's a big takeaway I took from my first game. Combat-wise, everything went into the zombies. Ramsay and I both come from a reasonably competitive game, so we both play quite quickly when you know that the other person's fine with it. And we didn't even end up taking the models off as we were killing them. I was just tallying, and it got to the point where the combat res overwhelmed, and we didn't even bother checky how many saves he passed, because the combat res alone just absolutely crumpled them. Huge win there. And then there was a little bit of a misplay on Ramsey's part. The front of the zombie unit was over 3 inches away from the front of the Graveguard unit, which means that when I overran with the chariot, I did get in, and I did get to make my impact hits on the next turn of combat, which is something that should realistically be avoided, but, you know, we're both testing out things here. Ramsey's turn again, and he doesn't take the bait. He doesn't charge with the Blood Knights, which is a shame, because I wanted to see someone do it so I can see how well it goes for me, because I'm convinced that that is the hard counter to the good cavalry in the game. But that aside, he reforms the Blood Knights, manages to get a good amount of spells off, because this turn my Infernal Puppet, who is in the bunker of Chaos Knights, is in combat, which means that the Infernal Puppet doesn't work. I'm also not able to do very many dispels. Ramsey manages to get basically every spell off that he wants, which is a real problem for me, and a reason that I might actually drop the Puppet in this list. The version that I've written to test going forwards, I think I'm more interested in putting a regen on the character, which we'll get to in combat. But yeah, if you're going to put it specifically into buff up the unit, that like the Death Star cavalry unit, it's going to be in combat quite a lot, so the Puppet doesn't have anywhere near as much value. And you've got magic resist on the unit, so one that I'm going to play around with for different, setups, but with the character points being tight, it's very hard to get survivability on that character and also get the Puppet on, so you've got to make some sacrifices somewhere. You can see on the right-hand flank, the zombie unit is getting fairly swole. You've got to put those regens somewhere, because nothing else is dying, or it's dying all in one go. And then we go over to combat. So, assailment spells. In the FAQ, it says that assailment spells do not get the benefit of strikes first from a magic weapon or something along those lines. So by that logic, we extrapolated that strikes last doesn't apply for your assailment. So Ramsey was able to hit me with his, fairly fast vampire who is spectral doppelganging with the great weapon. He manages to get it off. He's casting at +4 because the Mortis Engine is in range of the +1 buff, which is fine. Even through my magic resist 2, he gets it off. I don't manage to dispel it. He puts all his attacks into my Sorcerer Lord, who is stood right in front of him, not in a challenge, just stood right in front of him, and unfortunately rolls quite hot on the number of attacks. I want to say it was something like 10 or 11. Loads of those go through. I fail my 6-up armor saves. I fail my, my 5-up wards, and my character, my buff piece falls apart, which is the beginning of the end, I think, for the game. It's not a great start when your buffing character's dead and your opponent's got all of their buffing pieces. Other than that, I get loads of attacks in. Obviously, the impact hits. The Marauder Cav makes some slaps as well. The big unit of Knights makes some attacks. They do have Glittering Robe on. This is, again, an adaptation that Ramsey's gone for with the Illusion Caster. Everyone being -1 to hit. There's the Helm of Commandment in there. I should put that on the list. So that means that you buff up the weapon skill of the unit that you're in on a leadership test. Obviously, you're re-rolling that because of the banner that's also in the same unit. So you're pretty much always at good weapon skill. And what that translated to is every one of my models was hitting on a 5. So honestly, I think I did pretty well to kill as many as I did. I go in, I kill loads of models. Ramsey slaps my Sorcerer Lord to death, which is very sad. The Graveguard kill, I think it's 6 Chaos Knights, which is not too bad, honestly, given how many attacks that they've got going in. All of the Marauder Horsemen die. There were only 3 left at this point after a couple of them died to dangerous terrain and, just general perils. But, I'm feeling pretty okay about this. But I have to finish it up on my turn, and I have to try and get them as well, which is going to be a little bit more difficult. As for charges, I decide to overrun the chariot in after a discussion with James, because he points out that he does double outnumber me and he does have fear, so it would really suck if my character didn't make it into combat because it failed a fear test, which really would have sucked. But the Knights are not double outnumbered, so I decide not to follow up there and just get my Lance bonus, because obviously the Graveguard just gave ground, they didn't do anything else. My turn 3, and this is where I think I make my first sort of big mistake. My Dragon Ogres here, that's 250 odd points of my army that's doing nothing. Currently, they're positioned to back up the chariots that are going to deal with the Blood Knights, but Ramsey's just not going to give me what I want, and I probably shouldn't be leaving them there. I fail a charge forwards with my Mark of Khorne chariot, which is very sad. It puts me within 10 inches, so I'm not going to be able to countercharge next turn, so I know that that model is going to be in some difficulty. And then I just sort of move up to threaten with the other 2 units. The spawn move a little bit forwards. The chariot that is the general moves forward, so I can theoretically charge into the mortars engine if it stays where it is. I do have to face in a slightly odd angle. I don't want to get flank charged by the big unit of Blood Knights. That would suck. I do want to threaten the counter charge at least, or the ability to run away and make it so I'm fairly safe with that. And up in the top, I do declare charges with both the Warhounds and the unit of Chaos Knights. Here's the problem. I only pass the charge with the Knights. So I go in, the Chaos Hounds don't, so I don't get that extra combat res for hitting in the flank, killing some models from the side there. And yeah, Glittering Robe, it's a real problem. At this point, I don't have impact hits. I'm just rolling average. I kill a few Graveguard, not anywhere near as many as I need. And like I say, this is a real problem because I'm not going to be able to kill them. They're going to get rezzed up massively, and then I'm just going to lose because I'm dead. So the big learning point here is that I should have put more effort into killing the big Death Star. I thought I'd done it with those 3 units. Realistically, I probably want to put another chariot or maybe even 2 chariots into there and just try and focus fire and deal with the other threats later on. But yeah, not all that much happens. At this point, because I've got no caster, it's a lot of just sort of a little bit of positioning and then getting into combat, rolling loads of dice, and seeing how it goes. So turn 3, not going so great for me, and onto Ramsey's turn 4, where things do go pretty well for him. Oh, look at how many Graveguard there are. That is a pretty unacceptable amount of Graveguard. There's a big green heart, and that is an understatement. Huge number of Graveguard come back. I think they come back to near as makes no difference a full unit. On the right-hand flank, from my perspective, Ramsey decides not to charge the Blood Knights in, and that looks weird, but the reason for that is he really, really doesn't want to get challenged out. Blood Knights can't refuse challenges, so if he goes in, he knows that he's going to risk clipping woods, take some damage there, be slowed down. It's not what he wants to go for. So he just moves forwards positions so that my Mark of Khorne model has to go in. And realistically, I think his game plan for the Blood Knights is just to tie up that side of my army. The Knights lose combat with the unit of Graveguard pretty horrendously, so they fall back after taking some pretty heavy losses. The magic missiles go into the chariots. Don't get any wounds through from memory, or maybe 1 wound slips through and we just mark it later. But yeah, so basically almost nothing from the magic missiles. The combat just chipping away at those last few knights, and they're not in a great position because they have actually fled, so they're going to have to rally on my turn. Then when they potentially rally, they're going to be unable to march. I'm probably not getting out of range of the magic missile, so I'm not feeling good about those points. So I'm sort of sat there going, okay, how do I pull this game back? Well, realistically, I have to crunch either the Blood Knights or crunch the big unit of Graveguard. The way I'm positioned, I'm realistically not going to crunch the Graveguard, so at this point I've got to try and go for the Blood Knights, which is not a particularly appealing thought. So it comes into my turn 4, and I get a pretty decent charge into the Blood Knights. And this is a continuation of a misplay for how I use my Dragon Ogres. So if you see where the Blood Knights are here, I move the Chaos Spawn in to the flank, I charge the Khorne Chariot into the front, and that leaves a big space here in the middle. So I move my Dragon Ogres to fill that gap, basically, to potentially charge them, because I'm aware that I'm not going to kill them all in one go. I think realistically, I'm going to kill a few of them. I move the Dragon Ogres up so that I can get the charge in next turn after they're all rezzed, forgetting that when you kill models, everything sort of snaps together. So I've not really left myself any room. So this is a continuation of a misplay with the Dragon Ogres. I need to use them better in future. Up at the top, I decide that I'm going to charge in the Chariot. The reason I charge in is I've just got to kind of tie that unit up and not let them get anywhere particularly useful. Undead are very fast. Ramsey still has, 2 more turns. He could theoretically charge me on turn 6 if he wanted to. And honestly, I'm probably more safe in combat, just challenging out units or unit champions or characters with the Chariot here if I decide to go for it. I do rally the Chaos Knights. They run 7 away, but I'm aware that it's probably their doom. And I wasn't in charge arc, unfortunately, with the general charioteer to get into the Blood Knights. So I just position in a way that I'm able to get into them next turn, assuming that we get into this sort of big slog that I've keyed off for. We go into combat, and things go very well. I end up not declaring a challenge with the unit champion. I do declare a challenge. That's it. Ramsey takes it on the sergeant just in case he survives, and then he gets to make some attacks. I do plenty of overkill, yada yada. So that keeps him safe from taking loads of attacks from the Blood Knights in the front. But then the Khorne spawn make it into the flank as well, which is really nice because they have Killing Blow. I roll their attacks. I get 11 attacks. Ramsey's like, oh god, this is going to be it. I get like 4 hits because that's how maths goes. And then I make, I think, 3 of my 4, or I think it might have been 3 of 5 attacks go through as Killing Blows. Roll those 6s. So you don't get an armor save, you don't get a ward save, a regen save, you're just instantly dead, which is fantastic. Then I roll my stomps, and I remind Ramsey that I get Killing Blow on my stomps as well, and then I don't roll any Killing Blows on my stomps. But I've rolled very well on my attacks, and it ends up being a massive victory, dropping the Blood Knights to only 3. If only I'd managed to get 1 more unit in there, things would be looking significantly up, because then I could overrun into the zombie, potentially try and catch the necromancer the next turn. I'd have options, but I don't quite kill enough Blood Knights, which is a problem because, ta-da, they're back. They're back to full. Having a level 4 that can res twice and a level 2 that can res once. It just means that they weren't going to go away. The game plan here continues. We're just looking for continued combat with the Graveguard into the Aspiring Champion. The 2 Necromancers move to make sure they're safe, so they're out of charge arcs, but then also just look to cast some spells. The level 4 in the Mortis Engine does cast the Magic Missile, finishes off those last 3 on a perfect roll as well, by the way. Ramsey rolled 3 6s out of his 10 hits or something along those lines. So they die perfectly. They were always going to die, but it did mean that instead of only giving up a quarter of the points and being able to scurry away to safety, they do end up giving up the full whack, which makes it very difficult for me to come back in this game. Blood Knight combat goes on. I'm again challenging with the Aspiring Champion. Again, the Khorne spawn are attacking the flank. This time round, I do very little. In fact, I don't think I kill a single model in this combat, which is a real shame. And it ends up being a tie. So maybe I do kill 1 or something along those lines, because this is where Ramsey not having a musician on the Blood Knights is a real downside. We end up just in a locked combat, which is pretty nice for me, because then I can just plan to charge in next turn with my Aspiring Champion. And, oh god, look at those Dragon Ogres. They're so out of position. This is embarrassing. I hate to see that. My turn 5, I do actually get the charge in there. So I've got the Khorne one, who is at this point up to, I think, 7 attacks, which is wild. I've rolled so many attacks on my favourite of the gods. My general charges in, going to get some real sweet impact hits there. The Dragon Ogres about face and just try and do what they can. And the chariot on the left-hand side, this one isn't the general, isn't the Khorne one, it's just a chariot, just positions and starts running away from the magic missiles and the potential charges that are coming its way. I do move the dogs to block. So what I'm thinking is, if Ramsey decides to go for a charge, yes, it's a massive wheel, but I don't want to risk him catching me even accidentally. So I position it so that I'd flee through the woods and potentially die to dangerous terrain. It's a fairly small chance. It's like a 1 in 12 for that or something along those lines. But then I'd be able to get away with a chariot. And each chariot's worth 220 odd points, so you want to keep those safe when you're doing your endless game scoring. We go to combat. Blood Knights absolutely fold. These chariots murder Blood Knights, which is incredible. Huge fan. Definitely enjoying playing around with those. I might try testing some of the more upgraded, so like 2 good chariots instead of 3 mediocre chariots, but honestly, they're really punching above their weight as it stands. Again, I've given up on the Graveguard in the top left-hand side, unfortunately, and I'm just sort of playing for the points that I can get, which is few and far between at this point. We're kind of scraping for a closer loss as opposed to looking for. Moving into Ramsey's final turn, there's some positioning, some thought, and basically turns into a game of just, we're going to magic missile the shit out of your chariots. The Necromancer, he shouldn't be dead. I'm not really sure why it showed up as dead. Necromancer moves onto the hill. The other Necromancer just sets up there is a declared charge from the Graveguard into the chariot just to try and make me flee and, have to deal with that. Running through the woods, 1 in 12, I just lose a 200-point model. I don't roll poorly on the dangerous terrain, which is fine. And Ramsey just lights up my chariots, and the one that was the Mark of Khorne one just gets absolutely bodied. The other one takes a couple of wounds, but not too much, and that is the end of the game for James. So looking at it, I'm like, okay, is there anything I can do for my turn to scrape back a few points? And the answer is no. So I don't take any game actions. I could charge into zombies, but I'd realistically struggle to get anything meaningful in. The chariot in the top right isn't going to get any impact hits because I'm so close on the overrun. The Khorne spawn could maybe get in with a wheel, but even then, I'm not going to kill enough. They're undead, so they don't break. There's no way I can catch them. I just don't want to charge in and risk someone dying and giving up more points. And that ends, we tally it up. I think it was a 14-6 victory to Ramsey, which is, pretty reasonable. I definitely misplayed some of my assets. These Dragon Ogres down here in turns sort of 1 and 2, I think were really good as positioning because it gave me some backup into the Blood Knights. It meant that Ramsey couldn't charge them in. I think I probably should have just trusted in the chariots and used these more aggressively. Dragon Ogres absolutely ruin undead. They're very wounds dense, so they're hard to get through. They've got a good save. They've got great weapons. They've got stomp attacks. They've just got volume. They're exactly what you want to grind through the legions of the damned / undead. Other than that, not taking Mark of Khorne. I definitely don't like having Mark of Khorne on a chariot. That's a big sort of oopsie in the list building stage. If you take Mark of Khorne, you might get baited into charging. If you get baited into charging, then you fail because you don't have Swift Stride, so you can only go up to 13 inches, and it's just sort of like a flat 2d6, pick the highest roll. You then end up within the charge range of your opponent's cavalry, which means you don't get to use the counter charge, which is the whole point of the list. But yeah, no, I really like it. Changes that I've made. The spawn, I liked, honestly. They were pretty solid. They're a pretty decent filler unit, but I think I probably shave some points from my rare. I don't really know what, rare / special. I don't really know what I put in instead of them, but just some sort of like lone Shartag, 2 chaos spawn, something in that sort of 70 to 110 point range, and then I use those other points just to buff up my Sorcerer Lord. Give it ideally Demonic Mount and Regen or Meteoric Iron. Get it to a solid 2 or more saves. Give it that extra wound from the Demonic Mount. That's the changes that I'm thinking of bringing in here. Thank you for watching, and thank you to the support that I receive from my channel members. Huge thanks to the Grail Knight tier supporters, and also thanks to the Longbeards and the Fanatic tier supporters as well. If you want to support the channel, you too can become a member. The link is down below the video, but if you don't want to give me any money, which is entirely fair enough, I would appreciate the thumbs up, the comments, all of those good things that help me get found in the YouTube algorithm. They really help, and they've been helping grow the channel, and I appreciate the support that I've been given. If you want to see more stuff and just engage in the community we've been building, there is a closer order Discord down below. It's not a VIP Discord, anyone can join, but there are some VIP sections for the YouTube members at Longbeard tier and above. Currently, I'm trying to get 2 videos out a week on a Thursday and a Sunday, and also doing 2 live streams. That's a Tuesday and a Friday. I do stick to this as much as possible. So, check me out. I'll see you around.